What's up, tankers? How y'all doing? Cosmic Carry here. Today I want to discuss fatigue in World of Tanks, how to deal with it. Well, it's basically how I deal with it. What do I do? Because I'm just like anybody else. There are plenty of days when I just can't be bothered. When honestly, I just can't be bothered. I'm just not in the mood. But there's a big difference between what I do now compared to what I used to do back in the day. And back in the day, I'd try. I wouldn't be in the mood, and I'd still play, and I would play for an hour, play for an hour or two, and I'd try and somehow get good games out of the game, even though I just wasn't in the mood. And quite frankly, honestly, you can't play this game if you're not in the mood, if you're not interested. Those games are not going to come, and you're just going to end up hating the game even more so. And it's going to snowball into the next day and into the next day and all of that jazz. These days, I know not to basically mess with the game if I'm not in the mood. I'll check into the garage. I might have a game or two, if that. And but beyond that, if I'm not in the mood, I just won't go there. I'll spend the evening on Netflix. I'll spend the evening on YouTube. I'll go on Twitch. Anything but play the game, because I just know when I'm not in the mood. I just don't mess with it. It's for me. It's important to check every single day. Check my garage. Have a look at the sales. Like currently, they have a lot of random sales. They look, for instance, they have like the tier 10s are on sale, but like a couple of days ago, for 24 hours, they had some random consumables for sale. Food was for on sale and all of that. Yeah, so it's kind of good to check in every once in a while, and I think it's very different for me these days when I'm not in the mood, because not to touch the game, because I've researched pretty much, I'd say, like 80% of all of the lines, and pretty much you can see up on screen what I have left, what lines I have left to research, which is the French TDs, the Japanese heavies. We're doing the Swedish mediums. There's the Chinese. I need to do the Chinese as well, but quite frankly, I don't see myself doing the Chinese tanks anytime soon. I'm just not interested in them whatsoever. And I'm not really interested in these tanks. They're very mediocre lines. What I'm trying to say is, I've played all the great stuff. I've played all the great lines, with the great tanks and all of that stuff. So these days, if I'm not in the mood, you can't be playing these crappy lines in a bad mood. You'll want to shoot yourself, honestly, because these tanks are so crap and mediocre and average, and they're not special in anything in particular. That I know, just not, if you're not in the mood, just don't even try and get the daily doubles. You know what I mean? So what I'm trying to say is, if you're not in the mood, don't bloody play. If you are in the mood, play 100%. But the thing is, what do you do when you when you are playing? How do you get enjoyment out of the game? It's very important when you're grinding, especially in the early stages, is to do your research and don't just look at the tier 10. Look at the line as a whole. Are you gonna enjoy that line? And for instance, like the Brits here, they got a lot of great lines, and so some of the tanks are crap, some of the tanks are absolutely awful. But like, if you look at like the mediums here, the Cromwell, the Comet, the Centurion 7-1, these are all great freaking tanks. There's a lot of fun and enjoyment to be had from playing these tanks. I played what is the TDs up to the shipbomb, the FE405. A lot of great tanks here. The Conway, the Charioteer, etc., etc. the heavies, the heavies I absolutely hated. These ones. Where is it? The Churchill, the Black Print. I hated these tanks. Slow, lumbering, boring things. But once you hit the Carnarvon and the Conqueror, and then you're rewarded with one of these tanks. Really, really decent machines. So it's really important to choose the line as a whole and not just the tier 10. Don't just choose the tier 10. Of course the tier 10 is important, absolutely, but like this line, the French TD line, yawn. The Japanese heavy line, yawn. The Swedish mediums, this one so far is yawn, absolutely yawn. I'm sure things will improve. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. I haven't got a clue. But yeah, so be careful, do your research, check out YouTube vids, look at my vids, and I've got loads of vids on the lines as I grind towards the tier 10 and all of that jazz, absolutely. But yeah, be careful when you're choosing and what you choose. I would 100%, if you're starting out, start with a heavy line, because the armor is going to give you extra lives, extra health, and you already have extra health because you're a heavy, but it'll kind of give you a second chance. It'll give you 9 lives, so to speak, and you can take some punishment because of your armor, and yeah, it'll kind of extend your life span, your lifetime in the game. Lights, absolutely no, stay away until you've kind of mastered mediums, 100%. So understand that there's different, it's not just about TDs and lights and mediums. There's different variations of TDs, and I think it boils down to a lot of, like, tanks are, for instance, there's a lot of like specialty tanks that specialize sort of kind of in one thing. Like, I don't know, like the Waffentrager E100, I guess, that kind of it kind of it specializes in big burst damage, catching people off guard, but most players, they end up, you don't last till the end of the game, truth be told. So it's kind of like a specialty tank. Like the E100 is like very map dependent, I would say. So there's that. There's like one-off tanks. I don't know, like this one, for instance. It's kind of not that great, not that fantastic, and it's once in a while you'll have a great game, and I'm struggling not to call it average, because it's a pretty decent machine. I have got that many games played in it, but when it comes to consistent tanks, it's mediums. It's through and through. It's always going to be mediums. Mediums are your go-to tanks for having fun. You can play them like endlessly for hours upon end. So when you're kind of grinding out a medium tank line, pretty much for the most part, most of them are enjoyable to play. Not that painful to play, because they're consistent, because they're very flexible. Honestly, truth be told, that's the great thing about medium tanks. They're very flexible. They've got usually decent guns, decent armor. They got speed, they got mobility. You can relocate to another flank and all of that jazz. A lot of times with TD you can't do that. With heavies you can't do that. You choose a flank and that's the flank you've chosen. It's kind of tough to relocate. If you're spotted in like a medium, you've got options. Sometimes when you're in heavy you don't have options. Same thing like with a TD. And once you kind of like master mediums, you can move on to light tanks. Light tanks are a whole bunch of fun to play, absolutely. So yeah, so that's kind of, yeah, be careful with what you choose, which line you choose, and just remember, mediums, in my personal opinion, are not the most fun. Oh yeah, possibly maybe they are the most fun, because there's a lot of light tanks in the game um, that have fantastic mobility, but there's a lot that have just like medium type mobility at the same time. Um, Also, like when you're grinding out tanks, like for instance, I mentioned the British medium tech tree line. You'll come across some fantastic tanks that you might want to keep. That's another uh, great reason to choose that line, because you'll be looking forward to that tank and you get to keep that tank. Absolutely, the Cromwell is a fantastic tank. The Comet is a fantastic tank, and they're really great keepers, and you want to keep them and you want to keep playing them, and they're important to keep, and they're important to keep. It's important to keep playing them, because that's where your enjoyment is. Those are your go-to tanks when you do actually want to play, but you still feel burnt out and you don't feel like grinding. Your premium, those aren't, get lost. Those seriously, go away. Your premium tanks, they're there for a reason. Some of them are there to earn you silver. Some of them are there to train your crews. They're there for a reason. But the in my personal experience, playing this game for 6 years, there's a lot of tanks in the game that that are just regular tech tree tanks that I keep and I play on a regular basis, because that's where the fun factor comes from. As far as this game is concerned, it doesn't come from tier 10 tanks. There's plenty of tier 10 tanks that I get fun out of, but they're mostly, it's like, the, I don't know, like the E50, the T54, the T54 lightweight, LTTB, these kind of tanks that, to me, I think of them, and I instantly think fun, and I play them and I play them, and I don't necessarily play them to get my MOEs. Sometimes I do sit down and I try real hard to go for the MOE, but like the tanks like that I just mentioned, for instance, I just play them to play them, and where my MOE goes, I do not care. I've been playing my E50 for years now. I think my MOE is at around 90%. I could not give a toss if it hits 95%. That's not important to me whatsoever. That is, this evening I played in my E50 all evening, and it is a fantastic tank, and it's a load of fun to play in. And you'll notice that it's a pain in the ass. I need to change that. You'll notice that a lot of the fun tanks that I mentioned, for me personally, a lot of them are tier 9. What is it? The RU251, for instance, T54 lightweight, T54 medium, E50, M46 pattern. These tanks at tier 9. This is kind of like the secret, the hidden gem in World of Tanks. What is that? It's tier 9 tech tree tanks. They get preferential matchmaking, sort of, kind of, because they only play. There's only 10 tiers in the game, so either you're going to be top tier or you're going to be bottom tier, which is not at the end of the world, because you're playing against tier 10 tanks, and plenty of the tier 9 tanks are still very much competitive when they come up against tier 10 tanks. Absolutely 100%. And such as the M46 pattern, such as the E50, such as the T54 lightweight. These are still great tanks, even if they're in a tier 10 matchup. And the hidden gem here is when they are top tier and those tier 9 tanks are facing off against tier 8s and tier 7s, and there's not that much pride and glory in killing tier 7 tanks in a tier 9, but it's still fun and all that jazz. But you need to understand, the tier 9 tanks versus tier 8 tanks, it's a huge jump. It's a massive jump. It's nothing compared to when you go from, for instance, tier 5 to tier 6 and tier 6 to tier 7 and tier 7 to tier 8. It's like the minuscule changes compared to the jump that is when you go from tier 8 to tier 9. Like, for instance, mediums, the alpha damage on a lot of those tanks is almost double, whereas when you go from tier 6 to tier 7 to the tier 8, it a lot of tanks, sometimes it just stays the same. But you cannot compare, for instance, what comes to mind, like the Pershing versus the M46, the E50 versus the Panther 2. This is just like the tier 9s just obliterate the tier 8s. So tier 9 is kind of the hidden little secret, the dirty little secret that a lot of players not necessarily don't talk about, but it's kind of like tier 9 tech tree tanks. If you want to have fun, that's where you should go, basically. And another thing is, when we're on the subject of dirty little things, is you shouldn't be afraid to use premium ammo. I myself personally, I use premium ammo. I always have a healthy amount of premium ammo, and there's plenty of tanks that I own that primarily use premium ammo. There's plenty of tanks where I have a 50-50 loadout, but I will get into a game and I will instantly load my premium ammo. For like the IS-7, for instance, is a completely different tank in my personal opinion when you load up the premium ammo. Death Star, of course, that goes without saying, but like the E50 with its premium ammo, the APCR, it's just oh my god. Don't be ashamed. That's kind of the wrong word. I know it's frowned upon, looked down upon, but honestly, who gives a shit? You want to win the game, don't you? Absolutely, 100%. Fine. Don't be shooting premium ammo in a tier 10 against tier 8s, or if you're in a tier 9 against tier 7s. That's really dirty. And not only is it dirty, it's just wasteful. It's just not needed. You don't need it. But don't be afraid to load premium. I'm not afraid. I could not care less. If you get a hate message, at the end of the day, you're getting a hate message because that guy lost and you won, at the end of the day. So don't be afraid to use premium ammo. And this is from my personal experience. This is just my opinion, but my opinion is kind of valid. I've been playing this game for 6 odd years. As far as finding the tanks that you love, that's totally down to you. You need to understand that there's hundreds and hundreds of tanks in the game, and just because Quickie Baby, and I'm not putting him down for a single second, but and at the end of the day, who cares if I do? But if everybody says this tank is fantastic, tank is amazing, you must love this tank, and you don't, then you don't. Honestly, who cares? It's up to you. You're you. There's only one of you, buddy, and there's only one of me. And I don't like, for instance, I don't know. What are we looking at here? The mediums. Yeah, I like pretty much all of these. Well, I don't like that one, but you know. Oh, here, where is it? Yeah, I just don't like the 430U. You know, I'm just not interested in it. What is it, like a 10-second reload? You get much more alpha, you get much more armor, but perhaps if it was classified as a heavy tank, that I might like it. But honestly, truth be told, I really don't gel with this tank. This tank I do gel with. This tank I do gel with, 100%. You know, K91 is just blah. It's just whatever. It's just there. It's like a Object 430. I love you, Object 430. But you know, everyone thinks this tank is fantastic. Me personally, I don't do well in it. Therefore, I don't like it. I'm not saying it's a bad tank. I don't bloody like it, and that's that. And that's okay for me to say. And it's okay for you to say. You know, you don't have to agree. There are plenty of other tanks that you can discover, that you can gel with, and not everybody is going to like that tank. Only you are going to like that tank, and all of that jazz. But understand, you know, for instance, like I used to play back in the day with a guy named Ohm, and he loved his Jagdpanzer E100. He absolutely adored that thing. But how many tech tree lines had he unlocked? He'd only unlocked like one or two, you know, so his opinion was based on his experience, and his experience was very limited. So him saying that this is a fantastic, amazing tank wasn't really valid, because he wasn't comparing his experience in that TD to his experience in another TD, you know, because for instance, I know my TDs, and I know what are the better ones, weaker ones, you know, I can compare them in my head, and therefore, you know, my opinion's a bit more valid, you know. So, but and I know, yeah, you know what I'm saying. But yeah, so just enjoy yourself, absolutely 100%. Don't play the game if you're not in the mood, absolutely 100%. And if you are in the mood, and you want to play something, let's have a look. You know, some other tech tree lines that I can remember. I love the Germans. If you're interested, the Germans are about flat armor, technology, precision guns. The Soviets are all about tanks that have been approved by Joseph Stalin, and it's just about firepower, armor, really decent armor, but not very accurate guns. The Americans are great at a lot of things, but not fantastic at a lot of things, you know. A lot of great tanks here, a lot of samey tanks, I would say, but still a lot of really great tanks here, absolutely. What else we got? The Italians, not interested. Polish is it's pretty simple. Hold down tanks, just peek over a ridge line, you know. That's pretty much it when it comes to the Polish tanks. Not saying they suck or they're bad, you know, all of that jazz. Just peek, shoot, peek, shoot. That's pretty much how I played the whole line. The Swedes, a lot of specialty machines here, you know, autoloaders, all of that jazz. The Czechs, very nice, very nice. Quite a bit of fun to be had here, but not very well armoured. The Japanese heavies, they're just Japanese heavies, you know, there's nothing to write home about. Medium line was a whole load of fun, but they are kind of humongous, big and cumbersome until you hit the SDA1, which I absolutely adored. I loved that. The Type 61 I liked. The SDB1 I don't play it as much now. Chinese I kind of not interested. French, interesting lights, interesting order loaders. The heavy, the TD line, so far, nothing. What else we got? Oh, the Brits. All the tanks were pretty much designed in a shed at the bottom of a garden. That's what it feels like. Some of these tanks, they're just bananas. They're just crazy. It just feels like it was they were designed by Fred in his shed at the bottom of his garden, and there you go. But a lot of great tanks. Precision guns, good penetration, some decent armor. Stay away from this line leading up to the Death Star. If you can, free XP it to the Tortoise like I did. But yeah, so my take on fatigue in World of Tanks. Hope you guys enjoyed my vid. Rambled a lot. Take it easy. Adios, muchachos.